looked directly at Kate and stated assertively, "I know you must hear how Kelly speaks to her customers, yet you never correct her. I'm wondering why you allow her to continue being rude to them." Kate shifted uncomfortably. "I just talked to her the other day. I didn't realize she's still being rude." "I didn't realize you'd spoken to her." "I've spoken to her too, but nothing changed." Understanding. Corey continued. "Can you understand how upsetting it is to have to listen to her abuse her customers day after day?" I freeze. "Oh, sure I can," Kate responded. "I tried to be very nice when I spoke to her, and I hoped she'd change, but evidently she hasn't." Step 3. Define the problem. Corey said, "Up until today, I didn't feel that I had the right to say anything to you about it. But this afternoon I had to handle a customer who was so upset she hung up on Kelly rather than continue to be treated rudely. That's where I have a problem. I don't feel I should have to handle her customers after they've become irate." "I agree. I'll talk to her again," Kate told him. Step 4. Offer your best solution. Since Corey wasn't confident that Kate would effectively deal with Kelly, he offered a compromise. "Since this situation involved me, I'll be happy to be present when you speak to her. That way I can relate what happened with the customer and tell Kelly how much it bothered me. Then you can take it from there and tell her how you expect her to treat customers." Compromise. "Okay, that sounds good," Kate said. "Let me call her in now." Step 5. Agree on the resolution. "That would be great," Corey replied. Resolution. "I'm sure that together you and I can handle this to a positive conclusion." Reconciliation. Why this works. Corey was very direct in the manner in which he spoke to Kate, which let her know that he wasn't willing to put up with Kelly's bad behavior any longer. He made sure she understood how he felt, and then defined the problem he had when he handled Kelly's customer. Because he had no confidence in Kate's ability to deal with the problem, he volunteered to take part in resolving the problem, and she readily agreed. Something to think about. Don't beat around the bush or tread lightly with a passive boss. This type doesn't want to deal with adversity of any sort. So if you need your boss to deal with something, as Corey did, state clearly and assertively what you need. Offer an example of how you'd like the situation to be handled, which may give your boss some insight and direction. Or, like Corey, volunteer to take part in solving the problem. Applying the approach. Apply the following principles when dealing with a passive boss. You may not feel it's your job to be your boss's boss, but you can help change that. Encourage him or her to become more proactive. Rather than sitting by and allowing problems to continue, state very specifically what you need. If another employee does something that affects your work, talk to your boss. Speak assertively, say what happened, and explain how it affected you. If your boss is likely to say something to pacify you rather than face the problem, don't accept the boss's response unless you're confident he or she will follow through. It may be in your best interest to offer to help, as Corey did. Stay involved and continue to speak up about what you need. How to deal with a reactive boss. Valerie was busy completing a customer order when Denise, her boss, walked over to the team and said, "Hey everyone, I need you to stop what you're doing. I just got word that our VP is going to drop by our office this afternoon. I want each of you to start working on your quarterly reports. When Ms. Barrett comes in, I want her to see that we're on top of things." Denise thought that was a ridiculous request, since the quarter wasn't over and the report wasn't even due in the VP's office until a week after the quarter closed. She was about to say something, but knowing how reactive Denise was, she put her order aside and began to compile her report. Still, she wondered why that was necessary. Wasn't it more important that she work on customer orders that were due now, rather than to begin a report that she couldn't complete? Some bosses just don't think things through. Rather than being proactive, they react to outside stimuli without employing critical thinking skills. Rather than having contingency plans in place, they jump on issues before analyzing the consequences. When an emergency situation occurs, they immediately move into crisis mode. These types are usually highly emotional, easily frustrated, and may become volatile when incited. They're like sticks of dynamite, easily set off. When something upsets them, they may resort to inappropriate behaviors such as yelling, slamming things down, or even acting like a toddler having a temper tantrum. Working for a boss who is reactive can be tiresome, especially if you're a calm and controlled person. These bosses promote a disruptive environment within their work groups. To them, everything is a catastrophe or a potential disaster waiting to happen. When your boss reacts to every outside stimulus before thinking through the situation, he or she wants to take you along for the ride. Try not to hop on, or you'll get caught up in the chaos. Employees may grow weary trying to calm a reactive boss and will go overboard trying to fix a problem just to pacify him or her. Learning what triggers the overreaction will enable you to help your boss. Talk to him about creating a contingency plan to offset those types of circumstances. Most likely, your entire team is affected by your reactive boss, so if she continuously makes your work life miserable, it may be in your best interest to speak up as a group. Give specific examples of reactive responses and the effect they had on your team. Provide a clear definition of the problem and offer practical solutions. Valerie and her coworkers grumbled as they began working on the quarterly reports. This doesn't even make sense. We don't have the end-of-month results, so how is this going to impress Ms. Barrett? Don't you think it would impress her more if she saw us doing our jobs? Once again, Denise jumped without thinking. They agreed that Denise's knee-jerk reactions were wearing on them. Just last week, she overreacted when 2 employees called in sick, making the rest of the team take on all of their work rather than analyzing what actually needed to be done. Valerie said, "I think it's time we talk to her. Making us jump through unnecessary hoops is ridiculous. I'll do the talking as long as all of you can back me up." The group agreed, and together they walked into Denise's office. Step 1. Think first. Valerie did some quick thinking as they walked. She wanted to present herself as calm, controlled, and respectful when she made the point that working on the quarterly reports when they had customers' orders to complete didn't make any sense. She also quickly came up with a compromise she hoped Denise would accept. Step 2. Gain a better understanding. Denise, we wanted to talk to you about the quarterly reports you asked us to start working on for Ms. Barrett. Valerie spoke confidently, matching her facial expressions and demeanor to the manner in which she spoke. Sure, what's up? Denise looked surprised to see all 5 of her employees in her office. We'd like to know if this was something Miss Barrett requested us to do, Valerie queried. Denise answered, Well, no, it was my idea. I want her to see what a well-oiled machine we are. Valerie spoke thoughtfully. Do you think that's necessary when we all have customer orders to complete? If we put those aside to start our reports, we may have some unhappy customers. Shouldn't they take precedence over a report that we can't even complete at this time? I didn't realize you all had completion dates looming, Denise said. Step 3. Define the problem. We do, and it's causing a problem. When you asked us to drop what we're working on to start the reports that aren't due yet, we felt frustrated, Valerie said. I freeze. I mean, we do understand that you want our team to look good, but if that means upsetting customers, how good will we look to them? Understanding. Not very, Denise pondered. Step 4. Offer your best solution. Valerie continued. Sometimes we feel that you react to whatever is happening at the moment, and that causes a lot of frustration for us. I freeze. Do you think that before you ask us to drop whatever we're doing, you could first discuss the situation with us? Then we can all put our heads together and give you additional input that will help you decide the best course of action. Had you known we had customer orders, we wouldn't be here talking to you. Compromise. I'm sorry, guys. I know that sometimes I fly off the handle. I'll try not to do that in the future. I think your suggestion that we talk about issues is valid. Denise seemed genuinely sorry. Step 5. Agree on the resolution. We appreciate that. Resolution. We all want to do our best for you, but also for our customers. Reconciliation. Valerie felt proud of the manner in which she handled the conversation. I know you do, Denise responded. And about starting the quarterly reports, do you still want us to start those, or should we complete our customer orders? Valerie asked. No, get your orders done first, Denise told her. Then, if you're able, start working on the reports. Why this works. Even though Denise looked a little blindsided when the entire work group showed up in her office, having Valerie be the spokesperson helped keep the conversation positive and productive. Valerie was careful in the way in which she spoke, first asking questions to help Denise understand that her request was not practical. Then she defined the problem, both in this instance and in general. She offered a compromise that was constructive. Denise took responsibility for overreacting and agreed to the compromise. Going forward, the group agreed the next time she jumped without thinking, they'd respectfully remind her of their agreement to discuss the matter. Something to think about. Just because your boss is reactive doesn't mean you have to emulate that characteristic. It may be easier for you to comply than to take the time to discuss alternatives, but if you fall into the habit of continually jumping at your boss's every whim, you'll likely become frustrated. When that happens, you're going to stop enjoying your work and your attitude is going to change. So be proactive. Talk to your boss about how the constant overreactions are making it difficult for you to complete your job in an efficient and effective manner. Applying the approach. Apply the following principles when dealing with a reactive boss. Don't allow yourself to be pulled onto the wild ride that they can take you on. If it only happens occasionally, and you're able to comply without jeopardizing your work, just take a deep breath and don't allow your anxiety to get the best of you. Don't get in the habit of constantly mollifying a boss who consistently displays a knee-jerk response. If you can figure out what triggers your boss's overreaction, come up with a contingency plan for that scenario and present it to him or her. Show that you want to be part of the solution and your boss is apt to listen to you. When you tell your boss how the reactiveness affects you, it shouldn't be too difficult to get him or her to understand your point of view. Reactive bosses probably realize they're this way and are likely to be open to your compromise about working together to come up with the best solutions. How to deal with an unethical boss. Brittany worked in the billing department handling past due accounts. She had just hung up from a customer call when Zach, her boss, walked to her cubicle in a panic. Hey, Britt, I need your help for the audit tomorrow. I just found out that Chris is way behind in calling his past due customers. Here's a list of his accounts. I need you to make notes on all these that we've tried calling the customers. Just make up different dates so it doesn't look obvious. Brittany felt uncomfortable doing what amounted to cheating for the audit. She took the list from Zach without saying anything, even though she felt that what he asked her to do was unethical. It can be extremely uncomfortable when your boss asks you to do something that goes against your judgment. You know right from wrong and wonder why your boss doesn't appear to have the same morals and high standards. Unethical bosses disregard company policy. They feel that rules apply to everyone else and find nothing wrong with bending the rules to suit their needs. They may lie and cheat their way to success. They're masters at distorting the truth. And their unethical behavior may extend into unlawful conduct through padding expense vouchers, taking home supplies, or taking unauthorized time off, all of which amount to stealing from the company. So what do you do when you work for an unethical boss? You like your job. You may even like your boss. You just don't like his lack of ethics. Working for an unethical boss can be particularly tough, especially if you're forced to comply or sit idly by knowing that what your boss is doing is wrong. You quickly lose trust in the person for whom you work. When that happens, it's difficult for you to feel good about your job. If your boss is doing something unethical and it doesn't affect you, you'll have to decide whether to ignore it or go to a higher authority. This is always a tough call because going above your boss's head may have negative consequences for you. It may be best to ask someone you trust for advice. But if the unethical behavior does affect you and your boss asks you to do something you know is wrong, say no. Explain why you're not able to comply. If your boss doesn't ask but demands that you do something you know is wrong and you're forced to comply, voice your opposition to your boss. Speak calmly and address your concerns. Give your boss a chance to do the right thing. If she still demands you to complete the task, state your opposition in writing. Email your boss and explain why you're uncomfortable performing the task that your boss is requiring you to do. Putting it in writing may serve two purposes. You're protecting yourself, and you may make your boss think twice before involving you. When you work for an unethical boss, you have to think of yourself first to avoid negative outcomes. Document every conversation and print any emails or other written material that will back up your claim should you decide to go to a higher authority if the unethical behavior continues. After thinking about what Zach asked her to do, Brittany decided to tell him that she wasn't comfortable noting accounts just to get a better rating on the audit when she knew the customers hadn't been called. She knew that Zach had no problem with bending the rules to make himself look good, and that was one thing. Involving her was another thing altogether, and she didn't want to jeopardize her career for Zach. Step 1. Think first. Brittany knew she'd have to confront Zach directly and express her concerns. She hoped that by explaining herself, he'd understand and make the right decision not to make the notes on the accounts. Brittany knew that she'd have to present herself as strong and unwavering. Otherwise, she wouldn't get her point across. Step 2. Gain a better understanding. She spoke to him in his office, where they could discuss the matter privately. Zach, I don't feel comfortable that you asked me to note Chris's accounts, I phrase. I can understand why you thought about doing that so we look good on the audit, understanding. I just don't feel I should be asked to make the notes when the customers haven't been called. It's no big deal. I asked you because you're the best employee I have, and I know you'll get it done for me. Zach didn't seem fazed about her discomfort. Brittany said, Thanks for the compliment, but do you understand why I'm not comfortable doing that? Not really, Zach said. Let's say that I make the notes on the accounts when I know Chris hasn't made the calls. Then let's say the auditor finds out that I was the one who did that. Brittany looked directly at Zach when she said that, holding her head high and keeping a serious and concerned facial expression. No one's going to find out, Zach countered. Step 3. Define the problem. Brittany laid it out for him. Here's the problem I have. Let's say that someone does find out. It may be a remote possibility, but it's still a possibility. Zach, I could get fired for doing that, and I'm not willing to take that chance, I phrased. No, you won't get fired, Zach told her. If anything happens, I'll stick up for you. Step 4. Offer your best solution. Brittany didn't back down. She presented a strong compromise. Zach, I do not want to do this. If you're asking me, then I'm going to point blank say no. My suggestion is to have Chris make the calls to these customers and note the accounts accordingly. Compromise. There's no way he'll be able to get to all of them, Zach answered. How about this, Brittany asked. I'll make time this afternoon to help him call his customers. Compromise. All right. I'll have Chris start calling right now, and I'll give you the uncompleted list this afternoon, Zach said. But we need to get them all called. Step 5. Agree on the resolution. We will, Brittany assured him. Resolution. Zach, you know I'd do almost anything for you, but not something I consider to be wrong. I'm glad you understand. Reconciliation. Why this works. Brittany could have noted the account records when Zach asked, but doing so would have made her his partner in crime. Because she stood up for herself, Brittany was able to get him to agree to her compromise. Brittany knew she was taking a risk when commenting about his asking her to note the accounts, because he could have responded by ordering her to comply. In that event, she was prepared to send him an email documenting their conversation and reiterating that she felt it was wrong. She was pleased that he backed down and also pleased that their conversation ended on a positive note. Something to think about. If you work for a company that doesn't value ethical behavior, it may be in your best interest to move on. When your morals are completely different from those of the company for which you work, you'll be miserable. So, do yourself a favor and start looking for other employment with a company whose ideals align with yours. Applying the approach. Apply the following principles when dealing with an unethical boss. If you're aware of your boss's lack of ethics, but what he or she is doing doesn't affect you, think before deciding how to proceed. If you decide to ignore it, stay away from your boss as much as possible. You don't want to give others the impression that you associate with or support this person. Just do your job to the best of your ability. If you decide to take it to a higher authority, make sure you have good documentation. If your boss directly involves you by asking you to do something you know is unethical, say no. Explain why you're not able to perform the task. If your boss doesn't give you a choice, confront him or her and state clearly why you don't feel comfortable. If your boss doesn't back down, send an email documenting your conversation. In essence, you want to state specifically what your boss has ordered you to do and why you disagree. This may cover you in the event that someone else finds out. Of course, you may have some explaining to do as to why you didn't report the incident, but you should be able to defend yourself against that claim. After all, if you're ordered to complete a task, you really don't have much choice but to comply. Always document every conversation, print any written emails or other material that will back up your claim, and keep your file in a safe place. Chapter 6. Powerful phrases for situations you cause. When someone causes a problem for you, choosing powerful phrases and sending appropriate nonverbal messages will help you communicate in a constructive manner, no matter the depth of the problem or the person involved. It will take time to build your confidence, but don't underestimate your ability to handle conflict. If you work through the 5 steps to effective conflict resolution presented in Chapter 3, even if awkwardly at first, you'll reinforce your skills. When you see successful outcomes, you'll gain confidence in your ability to resolve any problem. But what happens when you're the cause of a problem? What happens when you offend someone or stick your foot in your mouth and say something inappropriate? If you're aware that you caused a problem, don't ignore it. Take the initiative and head the other person off at the pass before he or she confronts you. Think about what you said and how it may have affected the other person. Decide what you want to say to make amends. When you speak to the person, the first words out of your mouth should always be a phrase of apology, followed by a definition of the problem. I'm so sorry I said derogatory things about your proposal during our meeting. Apology. If you feel it's warranted, offer an explanation. Honestly, I didn't realize how it sounded until the words flew out of my mouth. Then I was too mortified to say anything else. I phrase. It's likely that the other person has the same interpretation as you, so rather than ask questions to gain a better understanding, reiterate your definition of the problem, showing empathy. The problem is that I didn't think before I blurted that out, and I understand if you're upset or angry with me. Understanding. Now give the other person a chance to respond. He might say, "Oh, it didn't bother me at all." Or she might reply, "You're darn right, I was angry." Either way, offer a compromise. Going forward, I promise that I'll do my best to think before I open my mouth. Compromise. End the conversation with phrases of resolution and reconciliation. Thanks for being so nice about this. Resolution. I want to keep our working relationship strong. Reconciliation. That's all there is to it. When you take the bull by the horns and own up to making a mistake, the response is likely to be positive, the conversation is likely to be quick, and you'll keep all your working relationships strong. There will be times, though, when something you've said or done bothers another person, and you aren't even aware of it. If the person is skilled in effectively dealing with conflict, your conversation will be resolved by moving through the steps. But what happens when the other person isn't skilled in conflict resolution? In that event, he or she may speak in generalities or resort to passive-aggressive measures such as ignoring you or giving you an angry look, in which case you're going to have to discern what the problem is. Or the person might directly confront you in an accusatory tone, yell at you, say something hurtful, or attack your character. The point of these personal attacks is to make you feel bad and put you in your place. And that's usually the result. When that happens, you'll have difficulty maintaining your composure. Let's face it, we enjoy being on the receiving end of compliments, but we don't enjoy being on the receiving end of criticisms, especially when they're delivered in a spiteful, mean-spirited manner. You may find negative feedback tough to swallow, but you can benefit from it if you take the time to listen, assess it, decide whether it's valid, and, if it is, use the feedback as a catalyst for change. So how do you respond to someone who angrily or emotionally blames you for something? Take a step back, rein in your emotions, and inhale deeply. Think about the feedback with an open mind. Look at the situation from the other person's perspective. Put aside your pride. Take the words to heart. Whether the feedback is valid, you upset this person and you're going to have to resolve the conflict to move forward. Follow the 5 steps and you'll be able to turn the conversation around, resolve the issue, and move on. Resolving conflict the wrong way. Jody worked as a reporter for a local newspaper and was editing an article she had written when Ted, her coworker, walked into her cubicle. Catching her off guard, he angrily lashed out. "You always ignore me when I ask you questions or try to talk to you. I don't understand why you do that to me, and I'm really sick of it. I don't deserve to be treated this way, and it makes you look like you think you're better than me. It's rude." He glared at Jody, who was aghast at what he said. She prided herself on getting along with her coworkers and on being helpful and supportive toward all her colleagues, including Ted. She was so appalled she shot back, "I don't know what you're talking about, and I certainly don't appreciate what you're saying. I don't always ignore you. If I don't answer your questions, maybe it's because you ask stupid ones that don't warrant answers. Did you ever think of that? And by the way, I'm not rude. I get along with everyone." Everyone else, that is. Ted spoke brusquely. "Oh, you think so? Well, I beg to differ with you. And I'm sorry if you think I ask stupid questions. Maybe if you got off your high horse once in a while, you'd be nicer to people. And yes, you are rude." He didn't wait for an answer, but rather stomped off, leaving Jody stewing about his nerves speaking to her as he did. Why this doesn't work. When Ted confronted Jody in an antagonistic manner, she immediately became defensive and aggressively defended herself, rather than taking time to recover, regroup, and think how best to respond. That wouldn't have taken long to do, but she spoke without thinking, and by doing so, she spoke to him as he had spoken to her, lashing out angrily. Until now, Jody had always prided herself on being able to get along with her coworkers. She felt she communicated well with them and was able to resolve any problem effectively. But this was different, she convinced herself. This was a direct attack on her character, and she had the right to defend herself. Jody concluded that Ted caught her off guard, and as a result, she didn't have time to prepare herself to have a constructive conversation. She tried to convince herself that she had a right to speak to him as he spoke to her, yet she regretted losing control. Later, after thinking about what she said, Jody admitted to herself that on occasion she had pretended that she didn't hear him. But that was because he asked her questions without noticing that she was at a crucial point in her writing. When she was so involved with what she was working on, redirecting her attention to answer his question would have caused her to lose her concentration. So at times she pretended not to hear. She wanted to explain that to Ted, but she was still angry with the manner in which he blasted her, and embarrassed that she lost her composure, so she ignored him the rest of the day. The next day they were cool to each other. As time went on, Jody kept replaying what Ted said, and every time she did, she'd remind herself that she had a right to feel angry. Consequently, their working relationship was strained. Step 1. Think first. You know that before responding to any statement or question, you should always think first and choose your words wisely. But that isn't always easy to do when someone confronts you with negative feedback. It may be nearly impossible when that person also attacks your character because you become emotional and feel hurt or angry. Your likely response, like Jody's, is to stick up for yourself. You want to immediately counteract the accusation, but the problem with sticking up for yourself without thinking first is that you're going to react defensively. When you lose control, you're apt to continue down that path, saying things that you'll later regret. And when you do that, it's going to be nearly impossible to recover and enter into a productive conflict resolution dialogue. Anger and resentment usually accompany defensiveness, and you'll be more likely to focus on those emotions than to think logically. But thinking logically is what you must train your mind to do when someone confronts you, especially in a poor manner. So take a moment to recover from the onslaught of words. Pause before you respond. Bite your tongue if necessary. Calm your thoughts and compose yourself. Focus on listening carefully without interrupting. Your gut reaction will be to interrupt, explain, or disagree. Don't. No matter the means in which the message is conveyed to you, listen attentively. Understand that the person giving you feedback may not have learned the components of effectively resolving conflicts, so always allow the person to finish without interrupting. As you're listening, maintain a neutral or concerned facial expression. Listen actively by maintaining eye contact, but don't overreact by raising your eyebrows, opening your mouth, or clenching your teeth. Breathe deeply to help you maintain your composure. Keep your body language relaxed and refrain from crossing your arms in front of you or tensing up. No matter how much you might want to, don't respond. And don't allow yourself to become defensive. Take a moment to process what the person is telling you. If, like Ted, the person uses words, always or never, ignore those words because they're usually voiced in anger or frustration. Ask yourself what the person is really telling you. Quickly assess whether the feedback is valid. Whatever you decide, the other person has a problem, so you'll need to resolve the issue. Think how best to respond, then continue the dialogue using the 5-step process to reach an agreement. Key points. Practice the following to help you think first. Focus on listening carefully without interrupting. Allow the person to get it all out. When you're listening, don't react. Keep your facial expressions neutral and don't show anger or shock. Keep your demeanor relaxed and refrain from crossing your arms or tensing your body. Don't become defensive. Stay calm and composed, as this will help you process the information logically. Pause before responding. Always think before you speak. Assess the feedback and plan your response. Decide how to respond, focusing on following the 5-step process. Taking time to think about a conflict. Jody worked as a reporter for a local newspaper and was editing an article she had written when Ted, her coworker, walked into her cubicle. Catching her off guard, he angrily lashed out. "You always ignore me when I ask you questions or try to talk to you. I don't understand why you do that to me, and I'm really sick of it. I don't deserve to be treated this way, and it makes you look like you think you're better than me. It's rude." He glared at Jody, who was aghast at what he said. Her immediate thought was to defend herself against his accusation, especially when he said she always ignored him, because she knew that wasn't true. Just as she felt her own anger bubbling up, Jody composed herself. She didn't respond, and she didn't react. Rather, she projected a concerned facial expression and placed her hands in her lap when he was speaking. She calmed her racing thoughts by breathing deeply and slowly as she processed the negative feedback. She knew that Ted was partially correct. On occasion, she had ignored him. However, she only did that when switching gears to answer him would have caused her to lose her train of thought. She thought about how to respond in a constructive manner so that they could resolve the conflict effectively. Step 2. Gain a better understanding. It doesn't matter how the message was delivered or whether you agree. You listened carefully, processed the message, and thought about how you want to proceed with the dialogue. Say something positive to put the other person at ease. I appreciate that you let me know about this. Let's talk about it. Compromise. Or, thank you for sharing that with me. I'd like to discuss it further. Compromise. Keep in mind that even if you don't agree with the feedback, something you said or did prompted the criticism. Delving further and making sure you understand where the person is coming from will help you know what initiated the feedback and how to proceed. Not only do you want to gain a better understanding of the problem, it's important to make sure that you both have the same understanding. You'll want to know what the key issue is, so you'll likely have to wade through the emotional words that are tied to the core message. Ask open-ended questions to gather more information. Can you give me some examples of when this happened? Ask close-ended questions to clarify information. Are you saying that during our meeting yesterday, I interrupted you when you were speaking? It's important that you clear up any confusion or misinterpretation before proceeding to define the problem. It's also important to remain objective when asking or answering questions. This isn't the time to defend or rationalize what prompted the negative feedback. When you feel that you both have the same understanding, offer a phrase of apology if you feel that will help. I'm really sorry that you had to come to me about this. Apology. When you offer an apology in that manner, you aren't necessarily taking responsibility for causing the problem. Rather, you're merely sharing your regret for whatever prompted the conversation. Then offer a phrase of understanding. I'd be upset too if I felt as you do. Understanding. Pay attention to the nonverbal message you're sending, as well as the one you're receiving. Keep your facial expressions and body language relaxed and neutral. Make eye contact and nod to show that you understand what the other person is saying. Watch for signs that the other person is calming down or is still emotional. By projecting a calm, composed demeanor, you'll help the other person calm down as well. You should now be prepared to define the problem, but if you need more time to process the feedback, say so. I'd like to think about it and get back to you later today. Make sure that you do get back to the person when you say you will. Otherwise, he or she is likely to become even angrier. But it's certainly okay to delay the conversation if you need time to think about the situation, especially when someone catches you off guard and you're ill-prepared to continue the dialogue. Key points. Practice the following when gaining a better understanding. Tell the person you appreciate the feedback no matter how it was delivered. Ask open-ended questions if you need to gather more information. Ask close-ended questions to clarify the information and clear up misunderstandings. Remain objective when asking and answering questions. Before you attempt to define the problem, offer a phrase of apology if you feel it's warranted. Saying something like, "I'm sorry this happened," apology, doesn't mean you're taking the blame for the problem. Rather, it shows that you regret the problem. If you need time to think about the best way to respond, say so. Tell the person you'd like to think about it and discuss it later. Gaining a better understanding of the situation. Jody smiled and showed concern in her facial expression when she said, "Ted, I appreciate what you're saying, and I'm glad you came to me about this so that we can discuss what's going on." Compromise. Ted seemed to relax a bit. Jody had already acknowledged to herself that on occasion she had ignored Ted, so she asked a clarifying question. "Are you saying that I always ignore you when you ask a question?" Ted admitted, "Well, not always, but a lot of the time, yes, you do ignore me. I know you have to hear me, but you act like you don't." Jody nodded thoughtfully. "I'm really sorry that you had to come to me about this. I'd be upset too if I thought someone was ignoring me." Apology, understanding. She was pleased to observe that Ted smiled and visibly calmed down. Jody felt prepared to continue the conversation, so she added, "Why don't you sit down? I'm sure that by talking through this, we'll be able to resolve the issue." Compromise. Step 3. Define the problem. When you feel that you and the other person are on the same page and have cleared up any misunderstandings, you can define the problem. This will be handled a little differently when someone has confronted you than when you confront someone else. When someone's come to you about something you said or did, it's important to define the problem from both perspectives. Here's how you view it, and here's how I view it. By defining both sides of the issue, you put yourself on a level playing field. You can then work through the issue to a satisfactory agreement. First, reiterate the other person's concerns as you define the problem from his or her point of view. I understand you feel that on occasion I interrupt you during meetings. Understanding. Gain agreement. Is that correct? Then state your point of view. After thinking about it, you're right. I have interrupted you on occasion. Next, provide supporting reasons. But here's why. State your reasons as an I phrase to show how you feel. We have a time commitment during our meetings, and I get perturbed when you take too much time and I don't get to speak. I phrase. If you don't agree with the claim, define the problem from your point of view and offer a phrase of compromise. I have never intentionally interrupted you, but let's talk about it. Compromise. Speak respectfully as you define the problem, as that will pave the way for an open discussion that will lead to an agreeable resolution. Show concern in your facial expression. Don't become emotional, but rather maintain a neutral tone of voice and keep a relaxed demeanor. Key points. Practice the following when defining the problem. Recap the other person's concerns. I understand that you feel that. This defines and clarifies the problem from the other person's viewpoint. Define the problem from your vantage point. If, after assessing the feedback as correct, state an agreement. After thinking about it, I agree with you. If you agree but want to provide additional information, say, here's the reason why. If, after assessing the feedback as incorrect, state your view. I appreciate what you're saying, but I have to disagree. Offer a phrase of compromise. Let's talk about it. Maintain concern in your facial expression and speak slowly and calmly. Defining the problem to clarify the points of view. Jody stated, I understand you feel that at times I've ignored you when you asked me a question, correct? Understanding. Ted nodded. Jody continued, speaking in a calm voice and maintaining a concerned facial expression. After thinking about it, I have to agree with you. At times I have ignored you, but here's why. When I'm in the middle of writing an article, I have to get my thoughts down as they come to me, otherwise I'll lose them. When you've asked me a question at that moment, I've kept typing rather than take the chance of losing my thoughts because I can assure you, once it's gone for good. And when that happens, I become frustrated. She smiled. I phrase. Ted said, Oh, that happens to me too. If that's happened to you, then you can understand my frustration. Understanding. I can. Step 4. Offer your best solution. When you define the problem from both vantage points and show respect for the other person's point of view, you create a dialogue in which the other person should be open to hearing your proposed solution. As soon as you agree on the definition of the problem, don't belabor or rehash the point. Be prepared to offer your best solution. Or, if the other person offers a solution first, quickly analyze it and either agree to it or offer a compromise. Remain flexible during the give and take exchange, especially if you strongly disagree on the best solution. Don't allow the discussion to sidetrack or backtrack. Work through any differences by showing that you're willing to cooperate because cooperation lends itself to collaboration. If the discussion stalls, suggest that you each restate your best solution and together analyze the consequences of each. If worse comes to worse, you may have to agree to disagree and put the issue to rest, particularly if the other person isn't willing or able to cooperate or understand your position on the issue. Key points. Practice the following when offering your best solution. As soon as you agree on the definition of the problem, offer your best solution. In the event that the other person offers a solution first, quickly analyze it. If you agree to it, say so. Otherwise, offer a compromise. Remain flexible while negotiating the resolution. Show that you're willing to cooperate by discussing alternatives to the proposed solution. Stay on track with the discussion. If the conversation begins to backtrack, bring it back to solving the problem. You already agreed on the definition, so there is no need to rehash that part of the dialogue. If you're not able to resolve the issue, you may have to agree to disagree. Offering your best solution to the problem. Ted suggested, "I'm sorry. From now on, I won't ask you any questions when I see that you're typing." Jody quickly thought about his proposed solution and said, "No, I don't want you to do that. How about this? If you come in and I'm typing, wait for me to get my thought down. And if I'm too involved to help, I'll give you a sign to let you know it isn't a good time. Does that sound okay to you?" Compromise. Ted said, "That works for me." Step 5. Agree on the resolution. When you agree to the proposed solution, offer a phrase of resolution. You might say, "Great, I'm glad we worked this out." Resolution. There will be times when you're not going to agree, but you can still offer a phrase of resolution. "I'm sorry we weren't able to agree on this, but I'm still glad we talked it out. Let's respect each other's opinions and let it go at that." Resolution. After offering a phrase of resolution, end your discussion by offering a phrase of reconciliation. "I enjoy working with you and wouldn't want any misunderstandings to come between us." Reconciliation. In the event you're unable to come to an agreement, end the discussion by offering an alternate phrase of reconciliation. "I'm sorry we can't come together on this." Resolution. "I value our working relationship and hope that we can move forward and put this issue to rest." Reconciliation. Key points. Practice the following when agreeing on the resolution. After you agree on the solution, offer a phrase of resolution. Follow that with a phrase of reconciliation. If you are unable to agree, offer a phrase of resolution suggesting that you agree to disagree and let go of the issue. Follow with a phrase of reconciliation stating that you want to move forward without letting this situation come between you. Gaining agreement on the resolution. Jody followed up by saying, "Ted, I'm really glad that you came to me about this. I'm sorry that I've ignored you, and I'm glad we found a solution that'll work for both of us." Resolution. "I think our conversation will make our relationship stronger, knowing that we can resolve any differences." Reconciliation. Resolving conflict the right way. Jody worked as a reporter for a local newspaper and was editing an article she had written when Ted, her coworker, walked into her cubicle. Catching her off guard, he angrily lashed out. "You always ignore me when I ask you questions or try to talk to you. I don't understand why you do that to me, and I'm really sick of it. I don't deserve to be treated this way, and it makes you look like you think you're better than me. It's rude." He glared at Jody, who was aghast at what he said. Her immediate thought was to defend herself against his accusation, especially when he said she always ignored him because she knew that wasn't true. Just as she felt her own anger bubbling up, Jody composed herself. She didn't respond and she didn't react. Rather, she projected a concerned facial expression and placed her hands in her lap when he was speaking. She calmed her racing thoughts by breathing deeply and slowly as she processed the negative feedback. She knew that Ted was partially correct. On occasion, she had ignored him. However, she only did that when switching gears to answer him would have caused her to lose her train of thought. She pondered about how to respond in a constructive manner so that they could resolve the conflict effectively. Jody smiled and showed concern in her facial expression when she said, "Ted, I appreciate what you're saying, and I'm glad you came to me about this so that we can discuss what's going on." Compromise. Ted seemed to relax a bit. Jody had already acknowledged herself that on occasion she had ignored Ted, so she asked a clarifying question. "Are you saying that I always ignore you when you ask a question?" Ted admitted, "Well, not always, but a lot of the time, yes, you do ignore me. I know you have to hear me, but you act like you don't." Jody nodded thoughtfully. "I'm really sorry that you had to come to me about this. I'd be upset too if I thought someone was ignoring me." apology, understanding. She was pleased to observe that Ted smiled and visibly calmed down. Jody felt prepared to continue the conversation, so she added, "Why don't you sit down? I'm sure that by talking through this we'll be able to resolve the issue." Compromise. Jody stated, "I understand you feel that at times I've ignored you when you asked me a question, correct?" Understanding. Ted nodded. Jody continued, speaking in a calm voice and maintaining a concerned facial expression. "After thinking about it, I have to agree with you. At times I have ignored you, but here's why. When I'm in the middle of writing an article, I have to get my thoughts down as they come to me, otherwise I'll lose them. When you've asked me a question at that moment, I've kept typing rather than taking the chance of losing my thought, because I can assure you, once it's gone for good, and when that happens, I become frustrated." She smiled. I freeze. Ted said, "Oh, that's happened to me too." "If that's happened to you, then you can understand my frustration." Understanding. I can. Then Ted suggested, "I'm sorry. From now on, I won't ask you any questions when I see that you're typing." Jody quickly thought about his proposed solution and said, "No, I don't want you to do that. How about this? If you come in and I'm typing, wait for me to get my thought down, and if I'm too involved to help, I'll give you a sign to let you know it isn't a good time. Does that sound okay to you?" Compromise. Ted said, "That works for me." Jody followed up by saying, "Ted, I'm really glad that you came to me about this. I'm sorry that I've ignored you, and I'm glad we found a solution that'll work for both of us." Resolution. I think our conversation will make our relationship stronger, knowing that we can resolve any differences. Reconciliation. Why this works. When Ted lashed out at Jody, her first instinct was to defend herself. She felt herself becoming angry, but because she had learned the skills to effectively resolve conflict, she quickly composed herself, got back on track, and moved through the 5-step process. Even though Ted had approached her, Jody led the discussion. She maintained her composure and showed through her facial expressions and body language that she was concerned, that she respected Ted, and that she wanted to find an agreeable solution. She wasn't afraid to agree with Ted's view that she had on occasion ignored him, and because she explained why she had done so, Ted gained a better understanding. The manner in which Jody spoke through the conversation kept their dialogue positive and constructive, and they were quickly able to reach an agreement. While this was a fairly simple problem between two coworkers, following the 5-step process will help you work through any problem, small or large. Something to think about. When someone gives you negative feedback, think of it as a positive. If it's accurate, it provides a growth opportunity. If it isn't accurate, it provides an opportunity to strengthen your conflict resolution skills. Remember, no one is perfect. We all have blind spots when it comes to our strengths and weaknesses. And we all do things that bother other people. The best teacher often comes in the form of negative feedback, but only when we take the time to analyze what we're hearing. So the next time you're on the receiving end of negative feedback, give yourself a reality check. Listen, analyze, decide whether to accept the feedback. Whatever you decide, the other person still has a problem with you, so work through the 5-step process to resolve the conflict. Then ask yourself, going forward, what can I do differently to avoid this from happening again? When you do that, you'll gain respect as a person who genuinely cares about how you treat others. About the author. Renee Evanson is a small business consultant and writer specializing in organizational psychology in the workplace. The roles defining customers, employees, and management, and the relationships among them. During her 15-year management career at Bell South Telecommunications, her responsibilities included customer service for the small business market, sales and marketing staff management, staff training and development, training material development, team leadership development, and strategic planning. After leaving Bell South, Renee translated her expertise and experience into a writing career. She is the author of Customer Service 101, Basic Lessons to Be Your Best, Customer Service 201, Managing Your People to Be Their Best, Customer Service Training 2nd Edition, Award-Winning Customer Service, Customer Service Training 101, and Powerful Phrases for Effective Customer Service. Renee has written numerous magazine articles on customer, employee, and management relations, and she has been interviewed and featured in several print and radio media. Renee has lived in Chicago, Florida, and New Jersey, but she and her family now enjoy life on St. Simon's Island, Georgia.
This has been a Gildan audio production. For more affordable life-changing audio programs, visit our website at gildanmedia.com. Audible hopes you've enjoyed this program.